Captain Sarah Chun sat in her command chair on the bridge of the human warship Defiance. The ship was not very big compared to alien vessels, but it was fast and smart. Around her, the crew worked quietly at their stations. Red lights blinked on the control panels, and the soft hum of the engines filled the air. Sarah looked at the star map floating in front of her. It showed hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Most of them had red markers. Red meant the Caltharian Empire controlled them. The blue markers showed human colonies. There were not many blue markers left. For 3 years, humans had been fighting the Caltharians. It was not a fair fight. The Empire had thousands of ships and ruled over millions of planets. They had weapons that could destroy entire worlds, and shields that human guns could not break through. But humans kept fighting anyway. Sarah remembered when the war started. The Caltharians came to Earth with a simple message: surrender or die. The human government tried to talk. They offered trade deals and peace treaties. The aliens laughed and attacked the first human colony they found. 2 million people died in one day. That was when humans learned what kind of enemy they faced. The Caltharians did not want to rule humans. They wanted to own them like animals. Any planet that fought back was burned to ash. Any ship that resisted was blown apart. The Empire had done this to dozens of other species across the galaxy. But humans were different. Instead of giving up, they got angry. Instead of surrendering, they learned to hide and strike back. Human ships would attack alien supply lines and then disappear into empty space. They would hit small outposts and rescue prisoners before the Empire could respond. It was like fighting a giant with tiny cuts, but it worked. Lieutenant Torres turned from his station. His face looked worried. "Captain, we have an urgent message from Admiral Reeves." Sarah nodded. Admiral Marcus Reeves commanded what was left of the human fleet. Before the war, he had been a peaceful man who explored new worlds. Now he was the leader of a desperate fight for survival. The main screen flickered and showed the Admiral's face. He looked tired and older than his 50 years. Gray streaks ran through his black hair, and deep lines marked his eyes. Behind him, Sarah could see the bridge of his flagship, the Yorktown. "Sarah," the Admiral said without any greeting, "we intercepted Caltharian military communications an hour ago. The Hegemony fleet is moving." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Every human in the fleet knew about the Hegemony fleet. It was the Empire's strongest naval force. Over 200 of their best ships, led by their most skilled commanders. The fleet had never lost a battle. It had destroyed entire star systems that dared to rebel against the Empire. "Where are they going?" Sarah asked, but she already feared. The answer: Earth, Admiral Reeves said simply. "Our intelligence says they are bringing enough firepower to crack the planet like an egg. They will arrive in 72 hours. The bridge of the Defiance became very quiet. Sarah could hear her crew breathing. She could hear the distant hum of the life support systems. She could hear her own heart beating faster. Earth was home to 2 billion humans. It was where the species had been born, and where they had learned to reach for the stars. Every human colony, every human ship, every human dream could be traced back to that blue and green world orbiting a yellow sun. "What about our defenses?" Sarah asked. Admiral Reeves shook his head slowly. "Earth has the strongest orbital platforms we ever built. Missile batteries, energy cannons, fighter squadrons. Under normal conditions, they could hold off a major attack. But this is the Hegemony fleet we are talking about. They have War Marshal Thacaron himself leading them." Sarah knew that name. Every human did. Thacaron was the Caltharian general who had conquered 47 different species. He was known for his cruelty and his tactical genius. When planets surrendered to him, he still killed half the population as an example. When they fought back, He killed everyone. Their flagship is the Eternal Dominion, the admiral continued. It is over 1 kilometer long and carries weapons that can destroy moons. Its shields have never been breached by any known weapon. Intelligence reports say Thackerone plans to broadcast the destruction of Earth to every world in the galaxy. He wants to make sure no one else ever thinks about fighting the Empire. Dr. Elizabeth Voss, the ship's science officer, leaned forward. In her seat, she was a small woman with short blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Before the war, she had studied alien technology at the Mars Research Institute. Now she spent her time figuring out how to destroy it. "Admiral," she said, "what about the other human fleets? Can they reach Earth in time?" "The second fleet is 3 days away, even at maximum speed," Admiral Reeves replied. "The third fleet is still fighting in the Centauri system and cannot disengage. If we gathered every human ship in the galaxy, we would still be outnumbered. 50-1. Sarah stared at the tactical display showing the approaching alien armada. Each red dot represented a ship capable of destroying cities. There were so many red dots that they looked like a swarm of angry insects moving across space. "What are your orders, sir?" she asked. Admiral Reeves was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with sadness. "All ships are to return to Earth immediately. We will make our stand there. Maybe we can hold them off long enough for some civilians to evacuate to the outer colonies. And if we cannot hold them, then we make sure the galaxy remembers that humans do not die quietly," the Admiral said. "Reeves out." The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in an uncomfortable silence. Sarah looked around at her crew. These were good people who had volunteered to fight an impossible war. They had families and dreams and fears, just like everyone else. But they were here, millions of miles from home, facing an enemy that wanted to erase their entire species. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres said quietly, "should I set course for Earth?" Sarah nodded. "Best possible speed, Lieutenant. And send a message to all department heads. Senior staff meeting in Conference Room 1 in 30 minutes. As the Defiance turned toward home, Sarah thought about the choice facing humanity. They could run and try to hide in the dark spaces between stars. Some might survive for a while, living like hunted animals. Or they could stand and fight, knowing they would probably lose, but hoping to hurt the Empire. Enough that other species might have a chance. It was not really a choice at all. Humans had always been a stubborn species. They climbed mountains because they were there. They explored space because it was possible. They fought impossible wars because someone had to. The ship jumped to hyperspace, racing toward Earth and whatever fate waited there. Behind them, the hegemony fleet continued its approach, confident in its power and certain of victory. War Marshal. Thackerone was already planning his victory speech and deciding which human cities to destroy first. But neither the alien commander nor the human captain knew that in 72 hours, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift forever. They did not know that one ship would prove that even the mightiest empire could bleed. They did not know that humans were about to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The war was about to change, and it would start with the most desperate gamble in human history. The conference room on the Defiance was small and simple. A metal table sat in the center with chairs around it. The walls were covered with computer screens showing star charts and tactical data. Captain Sarah Chun sat at the head of the table, looking at her senior officers. Chief Engineer Rodriguez was a big man with rough hands and oil stains on his uniform. He had built ships before the war, and now he fixed them after battles. Lieutenant Torres from Communications looked nervous but determined. Dr. Voss sat quietly, her fingers dancing across a tablet computer as she calculated something. Weapons. Officer Kim was the youngest person in the room. She had joined the fleet straight from the academy when the war started. Her job was to find ways to hurt the aliens with the limited weapons humans had. She was very good at her job. "Show me the tactical situation," Sarah said. Lieutenant Torres pressed a button, and the main screen lit up. It showed the solar system with Earth at the center. A massive red cloud was moving toward the planet. Each tiny dot in the cloud was a Caltharian warship. There were so many dots that they looked like a red storm approaching. "The hegemony fleet will arrive at Earth in 68 hours, Torres reported. "They are traveling in standard battle formation. 237 ships total. 6 super dreadnoughts and the flagship Eternal Dominion." Rodriguez whistled low. "I have seen the technical reports on those super dreadnoughts. Each one carries enough firepower to level a continent. And their shields can stop anything we throw." "At them, not anything," Dr. Voss said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was still staring at her tablet, but now she looked excited. "I have been studying Caltharian shield technology for 18 months. I think I found something important." Sarah leaned forward. "What kind of something?" Dr. Voss touched her tablet and sent data to the main screen. Complex diagrams filled the display, showing energy patterns and mathematical formulas. Caltharian shields work differently than ours. They use something called quantum harmonic resonance. Basically, they create a field that vibrates at a specific frequency. This makes their shields incredibly strong. "But," Sarah prompted, "but all harmonic systems have a weakness. If you can generate the exact opposite frequency at high enough power, you can cancel out the original signal. It is called destructive interference. In theory, we could collapse their entire fleet's shields at the same time." The room went very quiet. Outside the small windows, stars streaked past as the ship traveled through hyperspace toward Earth. Rodriguez was the first to speak. "What would we need to do this?" Dr. Voss pulled up more diagrams. "We would have to modify our main deflector array to generate a quantum resonance pulse. But the power requirements would be enormous. We would need to drain our entire reactor, core and channel it through the deflector in one massive burst. That would leave us without power," Torres said. "Worse than that," Dr. Voss continued. "The feedback from generating that much quantum energy would tear the ship apart at the molecular level. The Defiance would be completely destroyed." Kim looked confused. "But if their shields go down, our weapons still would not be enough to destroy their whole fleet. We only have standard torpedoes and phasers." Sarah studied the tactical display. The red cloud of enemy ships looked like death itself approaching Earth. How long would their shields stay down? The effect would last approximately 17 minutes, Dr. Voss answered. After that, their backup systems would restore the shields. 17 minutes, Sarah repeated. She thought about all the human ships and defense platforms around Earth. They had been built to fight normal enemies. Not the hegemony fleet, but without shields, even the mighty Caltharian ships would be vulnerable. She pressed a button on the chew. "Table. Bridge. This is the captain. What is our current position?" "We are 6 hours from the Sol system at current speed," came the reply. Sarah looked around the table at her officers. These people had followed her through 3 years of impossible battles. They had seen friends die and worlds burn. They had kept fighting when any sane person would have given up. "If we do this," she said slowly, "if we try Dr. Voss's plan, we will not survive. The ship will be destroyed, and everyone on board will die." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "But if we do not try, Earth dies. 2 billion people, including our families." "There has to be another way," Torres said desperately. "Some kind of escape plan or evacuation." Kim shook her head. The Admiral was right. Even if we could evacuate some people, where would they go? The Empire controls most of the galaxy. They would hunt down every human colony until our species was extinct. Dr. Voss looked up from her tablet. Captain, I want to be clear about what this would involve. We would have to get within 50,000 kilometers of the enemy fleet to make sure the pulse reaches all their ships. That means flying directly into their formation while they are shooting at us. How long would it take to modify the deflector? Sarah asked. 6 hours if we work non-stop, Rodriguez answered. But we would have to strip parts from everywhere else on the ship. Life support, artificial gravity, most of our weapons. Everything would have to be sacrificed to power the quantum pulse. Sarah stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the swirling colors of hyperspace. Somewhere ahead was Earth, the world where humans had learned to dream of stars. Soon it would be under attack by an enemy that had never known defeat. She thought about her sister who lived in New York. She thought about the children who played in Earth's parks and the scientists who worked in Earth's laboratories. She thought about all the art and music and literature the humans had created. All of it would be destroyed if the hegemony fleet succeeded. There is something else, Dr. Voss said quietly. If this works, if we can bring down their shields, it will prove that the Caltharian Empire is not invincible. Other species across the galaxy might find the courage to rebel. This could be the beginning of the end for their rule. Lieutenant Torres was shaking his head. But Captain, this is suicide. We are talking about flying one ship against their entire fleet. That is exactly what we are talking about, Sarah said, turning back to face her officers. The question is whether we are willing to do it. The room was silent for a long time. Through the walls, they could hear the distant sounds of the ship, the hum of the engines, the whisper of air recycling systems, the soft beeps of computers. It was the sound of a living ship carrying living people toward an impossible choice. Rodriguez spoke first. My daughter is on Earth. She is only 8 years old. If the Caltharians reach the planet, she will die anyway. At least this way she might have a chance. Kim nodded. I joined the fleet to protect humanity. This is what protection looks like. Sometimes, Torres was quiet for a moment, then sighed. My parents always said I was too stubborn for my own good. I guess they were right. All eyes turned to Dr. Voss. She had spent her life studying the peaceful applications of science. Now she was being asked to turn her knowledge into a weapon that would destroy her own ship. The mathematics are sound, she said finally. It will work. And if we do not try, then everything we have fought for dies with Earth. Sarah looked around the table one more time. These brave people were ready to sacrifice their lives for a plan that might not work. They were ready to fly into the teeth of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy with nothing but hope and determination. Then we do it, she said. Rodriguez, start modifying the deflector immediately. Dr. Voss, I want you to double-check every calculation. Torres, send a message to Admiral Reeves. Tell him what we are planning, but do not wait for his response. Kim, prepare our remaining weapons for the approach. As her officers left to begin their work, Sarah remained in the conference room alone. She activated the ship's internal communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In a few hours, we will reach Earth and face the enemy's strongest fleet. I will not lie to you about what lies ahead. We are going to attempt something that has never been tried before. It is dangerous, and we may not survive. She paused, thinking about the 300 crew members listening to her words. But I want you to know why we are doing this. We fight, not because we have to, but because we choose to. We fight because someone must stand between evil and the innocent. We fight because we are human, and humans do not bow to tyrants. The ship continued its journey toward Earth, carrying its crew, toward a destiny that would change the galaxy forever. The engineering section of the Defiance was chaos. Chief Engineer Rodriguez and his team worked frantically to tear apart their own ship and rebuild it into something new. Sparks flew from open panels as they rerouted power cables. The air smelled of hot metal and electrical burns. "Disconnect the artificial gravity generator," Rodriguez shouted over the noise. "We need every bit of power for the quantum pulse." His crew moved quickly, pulling components from the walls and floor. Soon, everyone would be floating instead of walking. But that did not matter anymore. 2 decks above, Dr. Voss sat surrounded by computer screens in the science lab. Mathematical equations covered every display. She had been checking her calculations for the 3rd time, making sure the quantum resonance frequency would be exactly right. One small mistake, and the pulse would fail completely. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, adjusting numbers and running simulations. Each test showed the same result. The plan would work, but only if everything happened perfectly. They would have one chance and one chance only. On the bridge, Captain Sarah Chun watched the main display. The Defiance had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Ahead of them, she could see the hegemony fleet in all its terrible glory. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, like a school of deadly fish. Each vessel was dark and angular, covered with weapon lords and shield generators. The smallest ships were twice the size of the Defiance. The largest were like floating cities made of metal, and Death Dot, at the center of the formation, was the Eternal Dominion, War Marshal Thacarone's flagship. It was over 1 kilometer long and bristled with enough weapons to destroy planets. Its black hull seemed to absorb light, making it look like a hole in space itself. Fleet composition confirmed, Lieutenant Torres reported from his station. 237 ships as expected. They are maintaining standard attack formation and moving toward Earth at steady speed. Sarah could see Earth in the distance, a small blue dot that held everything humans cared about. Around the planet, she could make out the tiny specks of human defense stations and orbital platforms. They looked so small compared to the approaching alien fleet. "Captain," Torres said, his voice tight with tension, "the Caltharian flagship is broadcasting a message to Earth. Should I put it on screen?" Sarah nodded. The display flickered and showed the face of War Marshal Thacarone. He was tall and covered with dark scales. His eyes were yellow and cold, like those of a snake. When he spoke, his voice was translated by computers into words humans could understand. "Humans of the 3rd planet," Thacarone said, "your pathetic resistance ends today. For 3 years, you have been nothing more than an annoyance to the Empire. You have destroyed supply ships and attacked minor outposts like insects biting at giants." The War Marshal's image leaned forward, his scaled face filling the screen. "But insects can be crushed. Your species will surrender unconditionally within 1 hour, or we will demonstrate the true power of the Empire. Your cities will burn. Your oceans will boil. Your world will become a monument to the price of defying us." The message ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Sarah felt anger burning in her chest. This creature spoke about destroying billions of lives as if it meant nothing. To him, humans were just another species to be conquered or eliminated. "Captain," Dr. Voss called over the communication system, "I have finished the final calculations. The quantum pulse will work, but we need to be within 50,000 kilometers of their formation center. Any farther, and some of their ships might not be affected." "How close is that?" Sarah asked. "Close enough to count the weapon ports on their hulls," Lieutenant Kim answered grimly from her weapons station. On the engineering deck, Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at his work. The main deflector had been completely rebuilt. Instead of a normal blue glow, it now pulsed with an eerie white light. Power cables as thick as a person's arm fed into it from all over the ship. "Rodriguez to bridge," he called. "The quantum resonance array is ready. But Captain, I need you to understand what this means. When we fire this thing, the feedback will travel through every system on the ship. The hull will start breaking apart at the molecular level. We will have maybe 30 seconds before total structural failure." Sarah nodded, even though he could not see her. "Understood. How are the crew preparations going?" "Everyone is at battle stations. We have sealed off the lower decks to prevent explosive decompression. Emergency life support is active in all critical areas. The crew knows what is happening, and they are ready." Through the ship, 300 human beings prepared for what they knew would be their final battle. In the medical bay, doctors checked their equipment one last time. In the weapons rooms, gunners loaded the last of their torpedoes. In the corridors, crew members said goodbye to friends they had served with for years. But there was no panic and no fear. These people had volunteered to fight an impossible war against an enemy that wanted to destroy their entire species. They had always known it might end this way. Sarah activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. In 15 minutes, we will begin our approach to the enemy fleet. What we are about to do has never been attempted before. We are going to prove that no empire, no matter how powerful, is truly invincible." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. These brave people had followed her 3 years of desperate battles. Now they were following her into certain death. "I want you to know that serving with all of you has been the greatest honor of my life. Today, we fight not just for Earth, but for every species in the galaxy that dreams of freedom. Today, we show the universe what it means to be human." The Defiance began to move forward, its engines glowing brighter as Rodriguez pushed them to maximum power. The small human ship accelerated toward the massive alien fleet like a single arrow shot at an army. On the Eternal Dominion, sensor operators noticed the approaching vessel and reported it to War Marshal Thackerone. The alien commander looked at the tactical display with confusion and then amusement. "A single ship?" he asked, his mandibles clicking in, what passed for laughter among his species. "Even for humans, this level of stupidity is remarkable. Do they think one vessel can threaten the hegemony fleet?" His tactical officer studied the readings more carefully. "Sir, it appears to be the same class of ship that has been conducting raids against our supply lines. But why would they attack us directly?" Thackerone waved a scaled hand dismissively. "Perhaps they wish to die gloriously instead of fleeing like cowards. It matters not. All vessels, target the approaching craft. Let us provide Earth with a demonstration of their fleet's fate." Energy beams lanced out from dozens of Caltharian ships, creating a deadly web of light in space. The weapons were designed to destroy asteroids and crack moon surfaces. Against a single human ship, they should have been instantly fatal. But the Defiance was not flying straight into the attack. Captain Chun had spent 3 years learning how to fight enemies with superior firepower. The ship twisted and dove through the incoming fire, its hull glowing from near misses. Some beams struck the shields, causing them to flare and weaken. But the ship kept coming. "Forward shields down to 30%, Torres reported as the bridge shook from impacts. "Hull temperature rising. More power to shields," Sarah ordered. "Dr. Voss, how much closer?" 70,000 kilometers and closing. We need to get to 50,000 for the pulse to affect their entire formation." More Caltharian ships turned their weapons toward the approaching human vessel. The space around the Defiance filled with deadly energy as dozens of alien guns fired at once. The ship's shields flared brighter and brighter as they absorbed impact after impact. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Kim reported. "We are venting atmosphere." "Seal." "It off," Sarah commanded. All non-essential crew to emergency stations. The Defiance continued its desperate charge through the alien formation. Its hull was scarred and burning, but it pressed forward like a wounded animal that refused to die. Behind it, a trail of debris and escaped air marked its path through the deadly maze of enemy fire. 60,000 kilometers. 55. 50-2. War Marshal Thackeron was no longer amused. He watched the tactical display with growing concern. As the human ship refused to die, what are they doing? Surely they cannot believe they can damage the flagship with one vessel. Sir, his sensor operator called out, the human ship is generating some kind of energy field. Our instruments cannot identify it. 51,000 kilometers. 50,500. 50,100. Now, Sarah shouted. Dr. Voss pressed the activation button with steady hands. The quantum resonance array that Chief Engineer Rodriguez had built from pieces of their own ship came to life with a sound like thunder. Every light on the Defiance dimmed as power flowed. From the reactor core into the modified deflector array, the ship's hull began to glow with an eerie blue-white light. Energy coursed through the metal like lightning trapped in a bottle. In the engineering section, Rodriguez watched his instruments spike beyond their maximum readings. The quantum field generators screamed with harmonics that no human ear could hear, but that every piece of technology on the ship could feel. Field generation at 60%, Dr. Voss called out over the rising noise. 70%. 80%. The bridge shook violently as more Caltharian weapons struck their failing shields. Sparks flew from control panels and smoke filled the air. But Captain Sarah Chun kept her eyes on the main display, watching the enemy fleet that surrounded. Them 90%, Dr. Voss shouted. Field coherence holding. 95%. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the universe held its breath. The Defiance hung in space between the massive alien ships, glowing like a small star. Energy patterns that had never existed before rippled outward from the human vessel. In invisible waves, then Dr. Voss reached 100%. The quantum resonance pulse exploded outward from the Defiance at the speed of light. It was not visible to the naked eye, but every sensor in the Caltharian fleet detected it. The wave of destructive interference spread through space like ripples on a pond, washing over ship after ship. War Marshal Thackeron felt the pulse hit his flagship and wondered what had happened. For a brief moment, every light on the Eternal Dominion flickered. Then his tactical officer began screaming, "Sir, the shields. Something is wrong with the shields." On the main display, Thackeron watched in disbelief as the blue glow around his ships began to fade. The energy barriers that had protected Caltharian vessels for 1,000 years simply vanished. Not overwhelmed or depleted, but canceled out at the quantum level. "Impossible," he breathed. "The shields cannot fail." They have never failed, but they had failed. Across the entire hegemony fleet, every defensive screen winked out of existence in the space of 3 seconds. 237 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy suddenly found themselves naked and vulnerable. On Earth, Admiral Marcus Reeves stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the tactical display with amazement. The red icons representing Caltharian ships had changed color. Where once they had shown the blue glow of active shields, now they showed nothing at all. "Confirm that reading," he ordered his sensor officer. "Confirmed, sir. All enemy shields are down. I repeat, all enemy shields are down across the entire fleet." Admiral Reeves felt his heart racing. In 3 years of war, human weapons had never been able to punch through Caltharian shields. Now, somehow, they were all gone at once. His communication officer turned toward him with excitement in his voice. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Defiance. The main screen lit up with Captain Chan's image. She looked battered and bloody, with smoke rising behind her on the bridge of her dying ship, but her eyes were fierce and determined. 2. Every human who can hear this message, she said, their shields are down. All of them. For the next 17 minutes, the hegemony fleet is as vulnerable as we are. Show them what happens when you threaten our home. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Admiral Reeves opened fleet communications and gave the order that would echo through history. All ships, all platforms, all defenses. Target the enemy fleet. Fire everything you have. Human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and moons suddenly decloaked and opened fire. Earth's orbital defense platforms, which had been useless against Caltharian shields, began landing devastating hits. Surface-based missile batteries that had never been able to reach their targets joined the attack. But perhaps most shocking was what came next. Civilian vessels throughout the solar system began moving toward the enemy fleet. Cargo haulers, mining, ships, passenger liners, and transport craft. Ships that had never been designed for war suddenly became weapons. Captain Maria Santos of the cargo ship Golden Dawn was carrying medical supplies to Mars when the pulse hit. She watched the Caltharian shields disappear and made a decision that would have seemed impossible minutes before. All hands, secure for ramming speed, she announced to her small crew. We are going to hit the biggest alien ship we can find. Her first officer looked at her in shock. Captain, this is a cargo vessel. We do not have weapons. We have mass. And we have engines, Santos replied. Sometimes that is enough. The Golden Dawn changed course and accelerated toward a Caltharian heavy cruiser. The alien ship tried to turn its weapons toward the approaching cargo vessel, but it was too slow. The human ship struck the cruiser's hull at full speed, punching through armor plating and causing a massive explosion all across the solar system. The same scene repeated itself. Humans who had spent their lives as miners, traders, and explorers suddenly became soldiers in the most important battle their species had ever fought. They rammed their ships into alien hulls, overloaded their reactors to create bombs, and flew directly into enemy weapons fire without hesitation. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, War Marshal Thackerone watched his invincible fleet being torn apart by creatures he had dismissed as insects. Human weapons that should have bounced harmlessly off his ships were now punching through armor and destroying vital systems. Damage report, he snarled at his tactical officer. 7 ships destroyed, 15 more heavily damaged. The humans are attacking from all directions with everything they have. Even their civilian vessels are joining the assault. Thackerone could not understand what he was seeing. In his long military career, he had conquered dozens of species. When faced with overwhelming force, they always tried to negotiate or flee. They did not throw civilian cargo ships at warships. They did not continue fighting when defeat was certain. How long until we can restore the shields? He demanded. Engineering estimates 12 more minutes, sir. But the humans are concentrating. Their fire on our shield generators. They seem to know exactly where to hit us. On the dying bridge of the Defiance, Captain Chun watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. Even as her ship came apart around her, she felt a fierce joy. Human ships were swarming over the Caltharian fleet like angry bees. Every few seconds, another alien vessel exploded or went dark. Rodriguez to bridge, came the chief engineer's voice over the failing communication system. Captain, the quantum feedback is tearing us apart. Hull integrity down to 15%. We have maybe 2 minutes before total structural collapse. Understood, Sarah replied. She looked around at her crew. Lieutenant Torres was still at his station, blood running down his face from a head wound. Dr. Voss was hunched over her console, trying to keep the quantum field stable for as long as possible. Weapons Officer Kim was firing their last few torpedoes at nearby enemy ships. These brave people had given everything for this moment. They had sacrificed their ship, their lives, and their futures to give humanity a chance. And it was working. "Captain," Torres called out, "I am receiving surrender requests from 12 Caltharian vessels. They are asking for quarter." Sarah almost laughed. After 3 years of total war, after threatening to destroy Earth and every human in the galaxy, the aliens were asking for mercy. But that was not the human way. Humans protected the innocent, even when those innocents had been trying to kill them. "Tell them to power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded," she ordered. "Any ship that continues to fight will be destroyed." The Defiance shuddered violently as another section of hull tore away. Through the gaps, Sarah could see stars and the distant glow of Earth. The planet that had given birth to humanity was still there, still safe, still free. On the main display, she watched as more Caltharian ships either exploded or surrendered. The mighty hegemony fleet that had never known defeat was being destroyed by the very species it had come to eliminate. War Marshal Facaron stood on his bridge and realized that he was witnessing something that would change the galaxy forever. His fleet was not just being defeated. It was being humiliated by a species that refused to accept the natural order of things. "Sir," his communication officer reported, "we are receiving surrender demands from the human fleet. They want us to power down all weapons and prepare for boarding." Facaron looked at the tactical display. Half his fleet was gone. The other half was surrounded by swarming human ships that attacked like wild animals. His shields would not return for another 8 minutes, but by then it would be too late. For the first time in his long military career, War Marshal Facaron gave an order he had never imagined speaking. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "All ships are to cease fire and prepare for surrender." On the bridge of the Defiance, Dr. Voss looked up from her console one last time. "Captain, the quantum field is collapsing. Total system failure in 30 seconds. Sarah nodded and activated the ship's final transmission. Her image was broadcast to every human vessel in the solar system and beyond. Behind her, the bridge of the Defiance was falling apart, but her voice was clear and strong. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was a very different place. In the capital city of the Caltharian Empire, High Counselor Vextar sat in his ornate chamber reading reports that would have been impossible to believe just 1 year ago. The report from the Andorian sector told of 3 colony worlds declaring independence from the Empire. The Andorians had been slaves for 200 years, but now they were fighting back with weapons and tactics learned from human broadcasts. The report from the Zephyrian system was even worse. An entire Caltharian battle group had been destroyed by rebels using something called human tactics. Instead of meeting the Imperial fleet in open battle, the rebels had hidden among asteroids and struck with surprise attacks before disappearing into empty space. But the most disturbing report came from the Empire's own military academies. Young Caltharian officers were asking uncomfortable questions about the Battle of Sol. How had one human ship destroyed the hegemony fleet? Why had the Empire's greatest military commander surrendered to an inferior species? Vextar set down the reports and looked out his window at the city below. For 1,000 years, the Caltharian Empire had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. No species had ever successfully resisted them for long, but humans had done more than resist. They had won. The door to his chamber opened, and Admiral Kethron entered. The military commander looked older than his years, his scales dull with stress and worry. He had been the one to tell the High Council about the destruction of the hegemony fleet. "The situation grows worse each day," Admiral Kethron reported. 17 more worlds have declared independence this month. Our forces are spread too thin to respond to every rebellion. What about War Marshal Thackeron? Vextar asked. Have the humans released any information about his fate? Admiral Kethron's expression darkened. The humans are holding him and 200 other captured officers at a prison facility on their moon. They treat the prisoners according to something they call the Geneva Convention. No torture, no executions, adequate food and medical care. That makes no sense, Vextar said. Why would they show mercy to enemies who came to destroy their world? I do not understand it either. But this mercy has had an unexpected effect. Some of our captured officers are beginning to question the Empire's methods. They say the humans are not the savage beasts we were told they were. Vextar turned back to the window. In the distance, he could see the massive statue of the first Caltharian Emperor, the conqueror who had united their species and launched them on their path of galactic domination. The statue had stood for 800 years, a symbol of eternal power. Last week, someone had painted human words on the base of the statue. The message had been translated as, "Freedom will not be silenced." The Imperial Guard had scrubbed away the paint, but everyone in the city had seen it. What do our intelligence reports say about human military capabilities? Vextar asked. Admiral Kethron consulted his tablet. They are rebuilding their fleet faster than we anticipated. They have also formed something called the Human Liberation Alliance with 17 other species. These allies are sharing technology and coordinating attacks against our forces. 17 species, Vextar repeated. 6 months ago, no one dared to openly oppose us. Now we face rebellions on dozens of worlds. There is something else, Admiral Kethron said reluctantly. Our spies report that the humans are building monuments to honor the crew of the ship, called Defiance. They have named Captain Sarachun a hero of their species. Her final message is being broadcast throughout the galaxy. Vextar had heard that message. Every being in the Empire had heard it by now. The words of a dying human captain had become a rallying cry for freedom across the stars. Today we proved that no empire lasts forever. Today we showed the galaxy that freedom cannot be destroyed by force. Simple words spoken by a member of what the Empire had considered a primitive species. But those words were tearing apart everything the Caltharians had built on Earth. Admiral Marcus Reeves stood in the new memorial hall dedicated to the crew of the Defiance. 300 names were carved into the black stone wall, each representing a human who had sacrificed their life to save their world. At the center was Captain Sarachun's name, surrounded by the names of her officers. The memorial was always crowded with visitors. Humans came to remember the sacrifice. Aliens came to understand how one ship had changed the course of galactic history. Children left flowers and drew pictures of the Defiance flying bravely into the enemy fleet. Admiral Reeves often came here when he needed to think. The weight of command was heavy, especially now that humanity had become the unofficial leader of the growing rebellion against the Caltharian Empire. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now working together, united by the example of human courage. Admiral, his aide approached quietly. The War Council is ready for you. Reeves nodded and took one last look at the memorial wall. The Battle of Sol had been a victory, but it was just the beginning. The real war for galactic freedom was still being fought on 100 different worlds in the council chamber. Representatives from 23 different species sat around a circular table. The Andorians with their blue skin and proud bearing. The Zephyrians with their crystalline features that sparkled in the light. The Denebians who communicated through patterns of colored light on their foreheads. All of them had been enslaved by the Caltharian Empire. All of them had found hope in humanity's example. The latest intelligence reports, Admiral Reeves began, show that the Empire is struggling to maintain control. Their fleet is divided, and their forces are demoralized. But we must not become overconfident. They still have vast resources and millions of ships. Ambassador Takala of the Andorians spoke first. Her people had suffered under Caltharian rule for 2 centuries. Our home fleets have secured the outer colonies, but we need more ships to challenge their core worlds. The Zephyrian shipyards are working at full capacity, added Representative Zephynos. We are producing vessels based on human designs, but incorporating our crystal matrix technology. These hybrid ships are proving very effective. Admiral Reeves smiled. This was exactly what the Empire had never expected. Instead of just copying human tactics, the allied species were improving on them. Each race brought their own strengths to the rebellion. The Andorians had the best pilots. The Zephyrians built the fastest ships. The Denebians had mastered stealth technology, but it was the humans who had shown them all that victory was possible. What is the status of Operation Stardust? Admiral Reeves asked. Commander Patricia Hayes, who had been Captain Chun's roommate at the academy, stood to give her report. Phase 1 is complete. We have successfully infiltrated agents onto 37 Caltharian worlds. They are making contact with local resistance groups and providing them with weapons and training. And Phase 2? Ready to begin on your order, sir. We have identified the Empire's main communication hub at Calthara Prime. If we can capture or destroy it, we can disrupt their ability to coordinate their forces across the galaxy. Admiral Reeves considered this. Calthara Prime was one of the most heavily defended worlds in the Empire. Attacking it would be almost as dangerous as the Defiance's mission at Earth. But it could also be the blow that finally brought down the Caltharian Empire. The risks are enormous, he said. We could lose half our fleet. Ambassador Takala leaned forward. Admiral, 6 months ago my people had given up hope. We believed the Empire would rule forever. Then one human ship proved that even the mighty can fall. Sometimes enormous risks are worth taking. Around the table, the other representatives nodded in agreement. These beings had all learned the same lesson from the Battle of Sol. Freedom was worth any sacrifice. Admiral Reeves thought about Captain Shun and her crew. They had known they would not survive their mission, but they had done it anyway. They had chosen to light a candle rather than curse the darkness. Very well. He sighed. Operation Stardust moves to Phase 2. All fleets will rendezvous at the coordinates Commander Hayes provides. We strike at Calthara Prime in 1 week. As the council meeting ended and the representatives returned to their ships, Admiral Reeves walked back to the memorial hall. Afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the carved names. He stopped in front of Captain Shun's name and spoke quietly. We are keeping our promise, Sarah. The galaxy will remember what you and your crew did, and we will make sure that your sacrifice leads to the freedom you died for. Outside the memorial, children played in the gardens while their parents watched. The stars. Earth was safe, but the war was far from over. The Caltharian Empire still controlled thousands of worlds and commanded millions of ships, but something had changed in the galaxy. A spark of hope had been lit that could never be extinguished. Species that had been divided for millennia were now working together. The impossible had become possible. The crew of the Defiance had proven that no empire, no matter how powerful, could defeat the spirit of freedom. Their sacrifice had shown the galaxy that sometimes one ship, one crew, one moment of incredible courage could change everything got in the depths of space. New battles were being fought every day. Former slaves were becoming soldiers. Conquered worlds were declaring,